Good evening, and welcome to the Vision Committee meeting. Hi, Tim.
Hi there.
And so you're late, so you get one less question. Perfect. Just want to tell you that. So, and for January the 22nd Vision Committee meeting, and would you call the roll, please?
Councilmember Dennehy?
Here.
Councilmember Maloney?
Here.
Councilmember Schmischer?
Here.
Councilmember Stein?
Here.
Councilmember Tracy?
Here.
Councilmember Worthington?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Hemrick?
Here.
Mayor Troutman?
Here. Hi, Emily.
Hello.
Hello. So, will you have the hand that goes up, so I know I don't want to ignore you?
Yes.
At times I'd like to, but I'm not going to. There you go. There's the yellow hand.
This is what it looks like. I hope that
Thank you.
works.
And all the fingers there, too. So, okay. You're not allowed to say that, are you?
It's okay.
Is it okay? Okay. So this evening, we are going to have the two distinguished gentlemen sitting before us. We have our police chief, and we have Sterling Jenkins of the, what is it? Crime analyst, is that the appropriate way? Crime analyst. So, and then we're going to talk about the firearms in public places ordinance. So gentlemen, would you like to take it away, and then we'll go to the firearms, we'll move into the next category.
Absolutely. Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, members of City Council. Happy New Year to each of you. Thank you for allotting us time this afternoon to present you with some valuable information about the police department and our city's municipal ordinances. This afternoon, I'd like to start by providing an overview of the police department's general performance metrics for the past year. I think you, as did I, will find that your police department worked extremely hard in 2024, providing the community with a very high level of service. The results, these results have been consistently provided over the last several years, despite significant ongoing staffing challenges, which impact nearly every unit within the police department. The team's commitment to these pursuits is unwavering. But I do worry about the sustainability, considering the day-to-day workloads shouldered by our team members in the midst of our ongoing staffing challenges. The figures provided to you this afternoon are the work of our crime analyst, as you introduced, Mr. Sterling Jenkins. Mr. Jenkins will explain his findings in summary fashion, and then providing you an overview of our team's work, and then answer questions that council may have after his presentation. I ask that you please be mindful that these data points he is presenting today are the byproduct of considerable work by Mr. Jenkins, completed by Mr. Jenkins, who has had to work within two distinctly different records management systems and computer-aided dispatch systems as we have transitioned this past year to new platforms. And he can certainly talk more in detail to that. Following Mr. Jenkins' briefing, we will also offer a recommendation to assess the need for City Council to modify our municipal ordinances regarding restrictions on the open carrying of firearms within public and sensitive places. And with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Jenkins.
Thank you, Chief. As Chief had said, I think it's important to look at the systems that we're using to look at our crime data and crime analysis overall. So I know on the agenda tonight we're dedicated to our crime statistics, but this is also police statistics because we want to look at crime as a whole, but we also want to look at policing as well. And so how we respond to that, how we track that, how we measure that, and how we respond. Is that better? Yep. Okay. So some of the systems I was in several systems pulling the data, and on May 7th, 2024, we went live with a new RMS system, and RMS stands for Records Management System. So our data is pulled from that, and this presentation tonight, that data is pulled from that as a primary source. Before that, we used what was called ITI Omnigo, so some of that data will be also discussed here tonight, and that data is from January 1 to May 7th of last year. So this information is mostly aggregate data for the year. I'm doing a comparative analysis for quarterly reports from 2024 and 2023 now, and that will be available soon. So overall, I wanted to look at the crime picture and starting out with the patrol division. We've had some attrition, some staffing concerns over 2024. We started the year with 16 officers and 4 sergeants. By the end of the year, we had 11 patrol officers and still 4 patrol sergeants. During that time, police responded to 26,832 incidents. Now, an incident, it's important to know what an incident is versus a case. An incident is anything a police officer does, from a traffic stop to a welfare check to opening up a case. So we track everything that they're doing as far as workload. And of those incidences, again, that 26,832 incidences, 3,785 cases were investigated through the department. And keep that in mind. Even the investigations cases, patrol starts that case and then passes that to investigations. So that's quite a heavy lift for our officers. They work 4 shifts. They work a day shift from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. and then a night shift from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. And they work 4 days on, 3 days off, and then 3 days on and 4 days off. They also dedicate themselves to a number of trainings, vacation, other things that may affect their statistics during that time period. So if we look at that, there were 1,468 arrests made from those 3,785 cases. Now, those cases can be anything from a probable cause arrest, an arrest warrant, or a summons to appear in court. And that's that aggregated data for this data set specifically. The good news is we have 4 cadets starting with us in 2025 that have recently graduated the police academy, and they'll be starting their FTO or field training very, very soon, as early as next week. And then we have 7 others that were sponsored for the spring, so we should have 7 other officers starting with us in May. And this is just another visual of what those incidents look like. So what we're usually looking at is out of those incidences, about 15% of those incidents turn into cases that need to be investigated. And from that, again, those arrests go to 1,468 arrests made. Now, keep in mind, these statistics are dedicated only to the Canyon City Police Department. This is not, we're not looking further into it as far as court processes, convictions, plea bargains, anything like that. That's just simply what we're doing or what Patrol is doing specifically day in and day out. We usually have about 70 to 75 incidences in a 24-hour period and about 10 cases every day for that same period. Those cases can be anything from petty offenses.
Could I ask a question? When you
Sure.
talked about your sworn officers and everything, does that include detectives and analysts and?
This is only for
This
Patrol
is-
that we're speaking
yeah.
of
That's
directly
all,
now.
just patrol?
We'll get into the investigations later, of which we have 6. We have a
Okay.
detective sergeant and 5
Okay, thank you.
detectives.
Okay.
But I just wanted to make sure we're starting from the backbone, what I say, for law enforcement with Patrol, and go from there.
And, you know, as we talk about these numbers, I think it's important to recognize, and I didn't talk to Sterling about this before, but that number of arrests will probably be more as we get into 2025 and more of our 2024 cases are cleared through our NIBRS reporting system. So there's a portion of those numbers that are associated with the cases, but the arrests haven't cleared. So that number could change as well.
Absolutely, especially at the felony level. So if Patrol happens to investigate a felony or a multi-felony case and that's passed to investigations, say in November of last year, it's not unlikely that case is still being investigated and worked by investigations into the next year. And keep that in mind when we talk about clearance ratings, specifically for our investigations unit. And having said that, Canyon City is very productive as far as their clearance rates. Now, when we look at a clearance rating, we look at all of the crimes that were investigated, and then we divide that basically by cases that were cleared by arrest or by exceptional means. Are we clear on what by arrest and exceptional means would mean? Okay, great. So our clearance rating from last term, from the 2024 period, crimes against persons, we have a 72% clearance rate. That's exceptionally high. And of course, persons crime include murder, kidnapping, sex offenses, assault, intimidation, and other crimes. National averages, the FBI reports, which I do have a citation at the bottom there if you'd like to click that link at any given time. FBI reports their most recent 2022 preliminary cases will be a rate of 12.3% for property crime. It usually averages, by the time they get all of their data cleaned, it's usually about 17% nationally of what property offenses are calculated and cleared.
Thank you so much for providing that context. I think it's really helpful to see not you can say that Canyon City is exceptionally productive in case clearance, but then to show kind of what the FBI rates are as well, I think gives us really good context as to what that actually means. Will these slides be available on the city website for folks who want to digest them more slowly?
I would think so. We could, yeah.
I don't have any objection with that. no.
We can add it to the meeting notes.
Great,
Yeah.
thank you.
So again, 72% for persons crimes. And we're looking at, again, 12.3% for, or I'm sorry, 34.7% for violent crimes nationally. CCPD annual clearance rate for property crimes is 34.25%. The great thing about living in a small area is oftentimes our suspects and offenders and victims know each other, so we can attribute to that. So it's like most things, 10% of your population may give you 90% of your concerns. So we have a high rate. I like to attribute that not only to the hard work, but again, the relationship between the victim and the offender. If you're in Las Vegas and you have a number of crimes that are happening between individuals that do not know each other, that clearance rate gets affected. So keep that in mind about how that culture of crime in your city is and how we are able to investigate that crime. So again, crime against persons, 72%. Crimes against property, 34.25. Also keep in mind that in one case, we can also have property crimes, persons crimes, traffic offenses in one case, right? I pulled some recent data today. According to Tyler RMS reporting, our average call to start to arrival time by agency is 15 minutes, 0.38 seconds. That's, again, from call to arrival. And also keep in mind that that is all cases. That's a hot call that it demands an emergency response all the way to a cold case that they're going to respond to and investigate. And once they are en route, once an officer calls on the radio and says that they are en route, our average time of a response to that location is 3 minutes and 8 seconds, which is fast. Of course, we live in a town of, I think it's about 12 square miles here, but there's still some anomalies on routes of travel and getting to that call for service.
Could I ask, are you pleased with the 15:38 average response time, or is that something that you're also concerned about and hoping with additional staff, or is that kind of where you think it should be?
I don't know that that's where it should be. I'm certainly confident that when our staffing numbers are flush, that number will reduce. And, this is data that he's just produced. I don't know what, if any, effect is contributing to that on the dispatch side. I know they have worked with staffing shortages and multiple calls tiering and trying to get that out in a timely fashion. So there's a number of layers there that we can evaluate, but I certainly expect if we get to full staff and we get all 11 bodies out there, that number would come down. Because that number is significantly impacted by the cold calls that he's referencing and them stacking. The priority calls are probably well below that 3-minute time for priority calls.
I would agree. And with our new system, we have 3 variables, 3 categories that we can look at. We can look at high priority, medium priority, and low priority. So now that we have a system that can actually track that data, I would like to look at what the average time for response is for each of those categories, and that will give us a much clearer picture once we disaggregate that data on those 3 responses and how those are defined and how those are responded to. So I hope to have more of that for 2025 now that we have the RMS system that will track that for us.
Thanks.
Sure. And although we do not have a dedicated traffic team, we do take traffic initiatives seriously, and it's definitely a high priority. And oftentimes during training, when you're training new officers, we do a lot of traffic stops. So you'll see that as the data develops throughout the year, that what those new officers are doing, how they're learning traffic stops, how to behave on a traffic stop, and how to investigate it. So just the patrol division alone at the agency initiated 1,829 traffic stops for the purposes of traffic enforcement, education, and public safety. So keep in mind, it's not always about making a traffic stop and closing that out with a crime. It's also about public education and public safety, such as the new construction on Royal Gorge Boulevard. People getting used to that, you could see that there were some behaviors that had to take place before people started managing that correctly, because, you know, once you've turned left on 4th and RGB your entire life and now you can't, that's a behavioral change that we have to look at. Responded to 618 traffic accidents during the year. And since the change to Tyler, so keep in mind this particular, go ahead, do you have a question? No? Okay. CCPD officers have issued 250 traffic penalty assessments and 484 summons. So a penalty assessment is your lower level offenses, that's just speeding. You can either pay the fine, show up in court, make that decision. Of course, the summons is as an appearance for court for a traffic crime or a traffic offense. So driving under the influence of alcohol, specifically alcohol, we had a total of 25 DUIs for last year. That's a little bit down from the year prior, I think was 36. And again, so that's an aggregated data regarding just driving under the influence of alcohol as a specific crime and a top offense for the case. Sometimes DUIs are actually associated with other crimes that we also look at. So we want to look at those crimes that are, again, not only traffic offenses, driving under the influence, but if that's associated with other things such as child abuse, eluding. I really want to look into that more and see how those DUI statistics can flesh out more in 2025.
I do have a question on that. So of the total of 25 driving under the influence DUI, were they all alcohol?
Not all. Some are driving under the influence of drugs. And so when I look at the quarterly reports, which you'll have soon, we do a comparative analysis between alcohol, drugs, or a combination of both.
Thank you.
And of course, that number will be impacted or influenced by those staffing levels, but also the end of last year and this year, we're focusing on expanding our young agency's capacity for working. These are very technical investigations that require some advanced training and perspective. So we're pursuing those things pretty heavily this year, getting all of our people certified in field sobriety testing, getting all of our people certified on the Intoxilyzer, which is the breathalyzer machine, so we don't have to rely on other agencies to come in and provide that service should we make an arrest. And that expedites things, because not only is it a very technical investigation, it's a very time-consuming investigation. And when you're working short, your personnel are reluctant to take those cases that may be borderline and take themselves out of the rotation and not be able to support their team members. So as those numbers grow, then we'll be able to look at those things more closely.
And again, there's a pattern to that. I remember when I was a patrol officer, it seems like my DUIs were at night and my drug cases were in the daytime. So I would like to look at those kinds of patterns, not only days and times of offense, but where they're happening, where we are making those stops and those arrests. We're also developing in-house instructors for DUI and DUID and Fourth Amendment. And so we're able to do things more in-house. Instead of having to send people out, we can train our own officers, hone those officers, and some of those officers that will be training in DUI are also new field training officers. So from the beginning, they can start looking into those investigations and training our new officers correctly going forward.
And thank you for bringing that up, Sterling, because that is a byproduct, of course, of our CDP program, focusing on developing those subject matter experts, developing those in-house training and expanding that capacity.
And again, this is just a visual to quickly show you what we had just discussed regarding traffic enforcement and the overview of that. And traffic stops, it's another thing to measure. A traffic stop for a warning might not take too long, but when traffic stops end up being attached to another kind of investigation, which we will look into further. A lot of our drug cases end up on traffic violations. That's where we're finding the drugs, is where we're finding the narcotics. So when you blend traffic enforcement with DUI training, with DUID training, that can lead into more drug investigations. And again, I'd like to look further into not only the amount of narcotics we're finding, but how we are finding them. There's a difference between finding it in a car, on a person, in a backpack, a number of different things. Where are we finding those? So if we can look at our drug investigations and look at those successes, we can then train to that. We can teach people more on what to look for on traffic stops. We have a number of people trained in what's called Desert Snow and other narcotics trainings that actually teach you how to investigate that better and more thoroughly. So I would, having an increase in DUIs and DUIDs in the future years might not be a bad thing. What it's showing is that we're actually catching the people that we may not have caught before, if that makes sense. And along with that, when I was looking at narcotics numbers, our patrol alone seized over 2,472 pills containing fentanyl on mostly traffic stops during the past year. A few of those are specific cases where up to 1,800 pills were found in one automobile. We become better at this. It's not only for public safety, but again, how many lives, how many crimes have you prevented? How many people have you saved if we actually lift those drugs off the street? It's hard to measure what you don't see versus what you do see. So again, just think of how many lives may have been affected if those drugs would have gotten into our town and further out. Having said that, we do have 2 canine handlers. We had 2 canine handlers until September of this year, and right now we're down to 1, which he also helps out on patrol. But he can be called out at any given moment if someone has a drug arrest or if someone has suspicious of drug activity in an automobile or another case. This canine unit can be called out, and our dogs are certified in both drug detection and bite, meaning they can also provide seizures during an arrest. With all the success of our canine unit, we were able to handle the cases last year with no bites. That also speaks to the use of force and how we're doing our investigations as well.
And our canines are certified in article searches and person searches. So just dovetailing off what Sterling talked about, our recent bank robbery, we called out our canine, and he successfully tracked the suspect path for several blocks in snow conditions. And this was, he probably got on scene an hour and a half after the bank robbery. So we were very impressed by that. A very accurate track that helped us produce additional evidence down the road.
They're a great tool to have, and that dog is young. He's only a couple of years old,
Yeah.
so we look forward to having him for a long time. The amount of training that a canine handler and a canine dog go through, you'd be amazed at the binders, the actual reporting systems that canines have to have for court. It's continual.
Just to ensure I'm reading the graph correctly, we seized 837,181 fentanyl pills.
That's grams.
Grams, okay. It was like, if you want to talk about 800,000 lives being saved, although with fentanyl, I mean, that literally could very easily kill everyone in our city. That is a huge testament to the work that you're doing with a very understaffed force.
Yeah, the significance can't be overstated.
And it can be in pill form, crushed form. This is in all forms. That's why it's broken down into grams for more clarification.
No, absolutely.
And out of our report system, we had 3 contacts. That it's not really clear on the screen there, but the number under the orange, it's actually a blue bar graph there. That talks about, that's actually deployment. So out of 3 deployments, there was 35 grams of cocaine seized. Out of 6 deployments, there were 43.61 grams of heroin seized. Out of 31 seizures, 678.921 methamphetamine grams. And then, of course, the big number for fentanyl there is the 837.181 grams of fentanyl off of 18 seizures. Keep in mind, we're also seeing that some of these narcotics are blended together. So some of these fentanyl pills or fentanyl narcotics cases also have methamphetamine or other narcotics that are embedded in that as well. Investigations, as we've said, we have one detective sergeant that is in command over 5 investigators. They had 215 cases last year assigned to them with a clearance rate of 45.5%. And the reason I wanted to bring this back around to the 45.5% clearance rate is, again, keep in mind that if we have felony cases around the holidays, which we do, November, December, those are now being worked in January, February, and going forward. 87 or 40% of those were sex offenses that were investigated by the investigators. And 21 for narcotic-related offenses. And then, of course, the others are disaggregated into other kinds of crimes, such as the robbery case, burglary cases, property crimes.
And just for clarification on those 5 detectives, one is a certified computer forensic examiner, split general duty assignments, and we have 2 narcotics detectives. So, and we're down 1 detective. So for the bulk of this year, well, I think for the whole year, I think we've had 3 general assignment. One of those is split as computer forensic examiner and our detective sergeant. So I think that's important to note.
And again, those are extremely time intensive when you're looking at forensic computer cases and how those may or may not develop. We did retain a certified forensic computer examiner. That detective actually he's now internationally certified to do computer investigations, and it's at a high level. His training is outstanding. I have high hopes for what he's going to be able to do for our computer crimes and those that are associated to other cases, especially sex offenses, child crimes, those kinds of things. He'll be an expert. He's already an expert in that area, and he started with us. Do you remember what month he came on last year? I'm thinking May.
It was in the spring, yeah, March, April, May, sometime in there.
Yeah, he's a great addition with, I think, over 15 years of service already.
Yeah.
Our school resource officers, I just had an interview with the 2 school resource officers we have. I wanted to capture not only what they are doing as far as police action and statistics, but what they do overall for the community. So we have 2 school resource officers that cover 8 campuses. One's dedicated to the high school. He's now in graduate school, and he also coaches football and basketball for the school and does a number of other things as well. The other officer is responsible for the younger kids at the other 7 campuses. He's a military veteran, and he's certified in a number of different categories that help him be a school resource officer and do those investigations. Keep in mind that a lot of the cases that we referred back to with investigations, those 40% of sexual offenses, a lot of them start being reported to the school resource officers. Because of their relationship with the students and relationships in the community, they have that rapport built. And so they do a lot with the investigators and also the Child Advocacy Center. When I look at the scope of their responsibility, having been a former law enforcement officer, it's striking to me how many people, how many souls, and how much property they're actually responsible for if something were to happen. So I requested these numbers, and I was told that there's approximately 3,237 students and over 500 school employees any given day during the school year that they're responsible for and that they need to keep overwatch on. They're both also SWAT trained and do a number of trainings with active shooters as well. Again, let that sink in. That's a lot of souls to be responsible for, and that doesn't count public events like football games. That doesn't count visitors to the school. That's just the people that we're aware of that are on those campuses every day. They responded to or initiated over 1,455 incidents and initiated 99 cases, and that's for 9 months out of the year. So the SRO's clearance rate for investigated cases was 72.5%. I did include cases that are forwarded to the district attorney's office for charges. And again, I think a lot of that is because of the relationship that they have with the community, with the students, with the administrators, and also with the Child Advocacy Center.
Remarkable numbers.
They also teach children about safe to tell. They teach them about how to basically deal with conflict in society. And again, this is just something that you can't put a number on, but I think that narrative, that explanation of what a school resource officer does is important to note. Personally, I would think a third of their job is enforcement, a third is education, and a third is community service. That's how I would kind of break that down in my mind. We have one parks officer now. He was out for approximately 12 to 13 weeks during the year, which also affects this number. And keep in mind, during half of the week, he has his days off. So he works, I believe he works 3 on and 4 off, 4 on and 3 off also on that schedule. He has decades of experience. He's the longest serving police officer that we have for Canyon City Police. I think he's over 40 years of service for just this department.
We recognized him recently.
Yes, and he was one of my patrol sergeants back in the day as well. He has a varied experience within law enforcement. So him alone, he responded to 521 incidents that were logged by him in 2024. We have plans on adding another parks officer in 2025. So those numbers will absolutely go up as well, and then we'll have more coverage throughout the city, throughout the town. And again, it's important for them with those ordinances, with city parks, trails, those kinds of things. They have to know those ordinances exceptionally well and how to handle those, and those changing ordinances and changing statutes that apply to those kinds of properties. This measurement that I have is an aggregate of Centennial Park, Veterans Park, and limited data in the Riverwalk. So when we look at Riverwalk cases, we usually look at 9th and Cell in a very limited area. The new system, the new report management system, I can actually geofence or put in coordinates into a crime map, and I can now map the entire Riverwalk rather than just those spots. So again, look for those numbers to go up. That doesn't necessarily mean that a crime rate is going up or that we have a spree or a series. It's just that we have so much better tracking mechanisms
Increase our
now than we did
accuracy.
before.
Yeah.
We're gonna have a finer point on everything we do from this point forward. That's my hope.
Couple of questions on the parks. Just want to make sure I understand. So the 521 incidents aren't necessarily the ones that Officer Zabruski responded to. They are all of the ones that occurred in Centennial, Veterans, and that limited area that is currently captured on the Riverwalk. Is that?
Yes, and but
Okay.
the majority, he's actually with other officers, so the majority of those incidents are still with him. As far as, again, not cases, but incidents.
Both primary and secondary responder.
Exactly.
Sure, but
Yeah.
given that we only have one, like
Yes.
the incidents that occur when he very rightfully is taking time off, those are also captured in that 521 number?
Yes.
They are of those 3 areas.
Okay. And then would we be geofencing? I understand, I mean, I guess it's been about a year now, but the IGA that allows us to police the entire Riverwalk, we would now be looking at that entire section, not just what's within the bounds of the city of Canyon City? Or would we be able to split those two things out so that we have both city numbers
I
and
think,
kind of
Sterling, you
CCPD
could parse
numbers?
those, couldn't you?
We can. It just
Okay.
depends on, again, the coordinates I put in and
Yeah.
the map that I make. We can map all of it.
Wonderful.
We can actually go outside of our jurisdiction as well and just map responses. We can't get all of the information from other jurisdictions, but we can at least have a picture of where things are going. So yes,
You spent about 20 minutes with Sterling talking about the robust nature of Tyler. He gets pretty excited about it.
I know it's been quite the struggle in terms of transitioning to Tyler, but the level
has.
of detail and accuracy that we're able to get this
And
year as compared to
comparatively speaking to
last
where we
is
were with
phenomenal.
ITI, with Omnigo, he was literally fighting a fight with one arm tied behind his back.
yes, this is much more robust. I was making crime maps out of Excel sheets, putting them into other mapping systems and mapping them this way. Now I can do this within seconds. Mayor Troutman visited my office and I actually showed him the mapping system and what we can do with it. And again, it speeds it up significantly. And from that, we can look at specific incidents, specific cases, and we can filter down into all incidents and cases, all the way down to specific ones we may be looking at. So our crime mapping software is now much more robust. Community service officers. This one unit has a lot of responsibilities. They do code enforcement, they do parking enforcement, VIN inspections, mobile home park inspections, trash hauler inspections. They're always in the community and they're always doing different things. They actually provide me a lot of insight because they're the eyes and ears on the community, but in a different way. They have a different relationship. They have a different customer service approach to the cases that they work. Now, keep in mind, they use a number of different systems that right now I haven't gotten access to and haven't familiarized myself with just yet. So this report that I'm looking at is strictly from the Tyler RMS and ITI system. So their numbers are actually more significant than what I'm presenting tonight. But over that time period last year, they responded to 1,926 incidents and investigated 67 cases that are just in this one RMS. They use Civigov. I think they still may use Mondays. They use a number of different software tools.
They've bounced back and forth.
And we've just hired 2 new CSOs that have a background in data analysis also. One is studying to get his bachelor's degree in cybersecurity, and the other one comes from the Department of Corrections, and so I meet with them. And they're as nerdy about this stuff as I am, and so we're developing spreadsheets that are going to paint a much larger and clearer picture of what that unit actually does. And I've noted that at the bottom there. The division's currently working on a workload assessment for the division. So we're able to not only show that, but train to it.
And again, this is one of our units that have been significantly impacted by staffing shortages. And for the bulk of the year, it's important to note that Jolene Inman, our supervisor, and Ethan Davis, who has been there all year with her, they've carried the lion's share of the water in this unit. And through those staffing challenges, bringing people in, washing people out, bringing people in, she committed to 970 training hours with new personnel as they were coming in. It has unfortunately been somewhat of a revolving door because this is grinding work. It's personal work. It's up close, and folks don't realize that till they get here. And some folks have a hard time with that. It's not for everybody. So she and Ethan, I just want to give a shout out. They have really stepped up for the city.
Quick question. Are the CSOs, do they also go through the academy? Do they go through a different level of training, or they go through the full?
They indeed have training platforms that they go through from animal control officer 1 to animal control. I think it's 3 or 4. In fact, Jolene just got back from the top one. And then there's other code enforcement schools that they go to. We have a natural footprint that we like to send them all to. And that's, we're a victim of circumstance there too, because when they walk out the door, they've taken some training with them. And as you can see with the amount of training hours that Jolene commits to as the only trainer really for the unit, it's been a heavy lift for her.
We also see the CSOs as potential for career developments within the police department. One of our detectives started as a CSO officer. We have a current cadet that was previously a CSO officer. So, we
Yes.
do see some opportunities there, and we try to advertise and promote that as a career ladder for people in the community. That's a good way to get in. Yep, get your foot in the door with the police department.
Thank you, Ryan.
And they also train together. They do Fourth Amendment training, constitutional rights, situational awareness. So they do a number of things that mimic sworn officers and blend in well. So when they're on scene, they're able to understand what's going on both sides of the fence as far as the sworn and the non-sworn. And it works out to our benefit, I think. But yeah, the 970 training hours by one supervisor is commendable. And I believe Lori Jenkins from Kinder Kids Child Advocacy Center comes and speaks to you about her role, and I wanted to speak tonight about what she also does with the department. So you're all familiar with the child advocacy and what they do, and she last year performed 125 forensic interviews. Keep in mind, she's the only forensic interviewer there for the CAC at this moment, so she performs all of those herself, not only for Canyon City Police Department, but for other jurisdictions as well. Her unit, right now, she's the only executive director, and then she has two other employees that work with her, and they also provide direct services and victim advocacy for the Canyon City Police Department as well. They've given 150 hours of advocacy, which means victim support, and over 600 advocacy interactions, which includes follow-up for the victims. And on top of that, over 100 hours of outreach. That means community events and fundraisers, again, with only one director and 2 full-time employees at this time.
Despite the fact that Lori presents in her own capacity here, I thought it was important to include her because everything they do is right in line with the police department, with the interests of the community, fresh in her mind, in her heart. And those 100 hours of outreach are probably just the recorded hours because she's a member of our Third Watch Committee, works with Shop with a Cop. And every community engagement event we have, she and her team show up. They're phenomenal.
And again, nothing is an island, so that school resource officer gets this report of a sex offense. They give that to detectives. Those detectives have Lori do the forensic interview, so that's the point of this whole team, is as we look at this, again, consider nothing is an island. This culture we have at the police department, the culture we have in town, we all work together, and this specific initiative with the Child Advocacy Center and the multidisciplinary team is significant as far as how those cases are worked and how those cases come to fruition, and how those forensic interviews help close those cases, usually by arrest or for exceptional means. So yeah, it's very valuable all the way through our system, again, from report all the way to the courts. So I think we have 5 more minutes? Okay. Good. So our records division, this is, I would say, the records division and the evidence, other than me, were affected in a substantial way as far as work volume with the new report management system. Again, when that system changed, there was a lot of learning, a lot of methods, and a lot of processes and procedures that had to change. Not that it didn't have to change for patrol and investigators, but records caught on more assignments that I'm not sure if they knew were going to actually land in their wheelhouse this year. So if you look at just the customer service alone, the phone calls alone, they responded to over 2,000 phone calls and assisted the public in the lobby, again, for over 2,000 times within that year. And that's with a limited staff. Most of that year had one supervisor over that area and mostly part-time help that was helping. Records is very important because everything that patrol investigations touches goes to records. From that point, they also have to have a relationship with the court system to get those records to the courts, get those records to the public. And some of that is very time-consuming, and of the essence of if a person comes in and they need a report, they need to get the report immediately. And they handle that.
I'm sorry. I just dovetailing off what Sterling was saying, it is important to recognize that they are, again, one of those units impacted by staffing challenges, but their workload has certainly increased since we've switched to Tyler, trying to understand and navigate those necessary changes, identify those new workflows. And you compound that with a brand new district attorney coming in, where we're committed at a very high level across the board throughout the region to establish those sure-footed workflows so that we get away from and stay away from those discovery issues and things that hamper prosecution. So it's been a considerably heavy lift for them and digital evidence in particular.
And we have one half-time employee that also helps with case approvals before those cases are actually finally approved and move forward into the system. That alone, that extra piece there is significant as far as the workload for that department that started in May. Digital evidence, again, when anything remotely changes in an RMS, they're going to be affected. for much of last year, we only had one dedicated full-time technician to actually review and process digital evidence. And then we had a part-time employee, Courtney, came on to assist Kim, the full-time employee, and
I think she arrived in April.
she arrived in April, and
Yeah.
lucky her, right before Tyler took off. She starts in April. We have the new RMS system. She has a wealth of experience and background in records management and digital evidence. So she's able to step in and help. So when you see these spikes in cases and incidents that were reviewed in May, September, and October, that's not necessarily an increase in workload, that's increase in performance because we're now adding her to the system. It's reported a total of 10,274 incident and cases were reviewed, and 2,000 of those cases, over 2,149 cases were sent to the DA. This is one of the most impressive things. I actually shadowed them one day because it was like I needed a Rosetta Stone or something to understand what digital evidence is actually doing. I've been involved in criminology or criminal justice in some capacity for 20 years, and I never really understood what happened on the support side and what that demand actually looks like until I sat down with them and watched what they do. So when body cam footage is requested, they need to go through and look at that body cam footage and be able to redact faces, blur out faces, bleep out language, protect child victims, protect other victims, and so they watch all those body cams. If you have 5 officers on scene, they have to look at every one of those body cams and filter through it and make sure that the law is followed and the integrity of the case is taken into consideration. The total time spent on that was 4,929 minutes or 82.15 hours. I talked to Courtney today, and she thinks she has one case that was around 30 hours to actually clean and redact. Now imagine that, and I'm not trying to put this out into the universe, I'm not wishing for it, but one critical incident, imagine one critical incident and body cam footage going through, and the courts need that footage in order to go with the prosecution. What that lift would look like if something like that were to happen. I believe in preparing for the worst, right? And looking at what we can do in case something does happen in that regard. Yeah, knock on wood. Physical evidence. So physical evidence is another part of our process, and it is also just as complex, and a lot of what she does is a moving target. So we have one physical evidence technician that started in July of 2023, and she's worked through different systems, different methods, and of course a different RMS. She and I will be working on a project soon regarding processing narcotics that are seized and discovered, so we can have even a better number for you next time. And we're also looking at stolen guns. If there are stolen guns in this community and they end up in another part of the state or another part of the nation, we're trying to help track that and look at where those guns are recovered. As a total of just evidence that she took in this year is 2,229 pieces of evidence, this one person over that time period. Total firearms collected were 468. Now keep in mind, that's not always associated to a crime. It may be collected as evidence, safekeeping, property, a number of different things, but that's a big responsibility to take in that many firearms and track them appropriately. Total drug items, including paraphernalia, she took in 1,532.
I think
And that's just drugs and guns.
we're gonna have a hard stop at 6 o'clock.
Okay, sir.
And we also have another topic that we need to cover, so
Yeah,
please leave us a
so-
few minutes.
Okay. We can revisit this, or I can put things out more into the public.
We'll
forum.
share the presentation with you. Goals and considerations that he didn't get to. Citizen Connect Go Live, we're going to be releasing this year. He was working on an RGB traffic study, and then data related to our Jake Brake ordinance. Power Engage with Tyler. We've lost customer service data because there's no, we've just recently learned that it did not transition to Tyler, that there's an integration problem. Tyler's working on that fix right now. Resource allocation, staffing analysis, tracking, he talked about the guns and narcotics. And we want to focus on use of force analysis to help us better understand things as we move through the year, neighborhood watch and co-response. And any questions
Yes.
on that? I know we're limited on time.
I wanted to filter back to about a little over a year ago. You came in and gave a very good analysis of a systematic, objective way of promoting the people within as to what they had to accomplish. Has that worked?
Yes, ma'am. That was the CDP. I referenced that when he was talking about DUI enforcement, and we talked about expanding that capacity. And Sterling talked about in-house training, developing those subject matter experts. Our training rate has skyrocketed to meet those benchmarks as they progress through the career development program. So I think it absolutely is beneficial.
I have one additional, and I think it might be better suited for maybe a topic of another meeting, given the limited time that we have left. But thank you so much for all of the hard work that clearly went into this presentation and all of the hard work that goes into the numbers that went into the presentation. I do think it would be helpful, and it's great to hear that we'll have 4 new cadets starting soon and 7 officers hopefully in the academy in May. But I think it would be helpful to have a broader conversation about staffing trends and what can we do. I know, morale in the CCPD seems really high, but we live in a socioeconomically more challenged area, and oftentimes folks are able to commute and get a much higher salary. So I do think it would be helpful, knowing how beneficial the program is that Councilmember Worthington referenced, to have kind of a broader conversation about staffing and about ensuring that we are keeping our numbers up and what we're looking at. I think the other piece of the conversation that would be really helpful to have is kind of what are the overall crime trends in our community? What are we, not just our responses to them, but like what are we seeing, what are we tracking, and how are we working on crime prevention as obviously a huge component to CCPD's mission. And I know a lot of effort in what y'all do goes towards that. And I know we don't have time to do either of those topics justice
I was just
tonight,
going to say,
but-
those are all topics that we can bring back to council.
Thank you.
But we'll do it one at a time.
Sounds great. And maybe not just before Planning Commission. Thank you.
Let's enumerate those and get a date quickly, or even if they have to have a special meeting to bring it down, because not only is it interesting to council, but to the public as well.
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor.
Okay? And
Absolutely.
So we really appreciate it. Well done. I have been out there with Sterling and been amazed when I asked certain areas, and click, click, there it is.
There it is.
And I was not reported as a criminal, so I'm fine with that. But it was
We're lucky to have
Ver-
Sterling. Yes, sir.
extremely impressive, because it took seconds and you had everything right there. It's amazing. So
We're real excited about Sterling's arrival, Tyler's arrival, and we're going to dial in our focused efforts and understanding the crime picture and focusing on
okay.
things.
So I would like to have council submit those questions like you had, Amy,
Please.
and to Ryan and Kathy, and let's do this again.
Yes, sir.
In an open public session, so we can hear about that, because it is a very intense thing, crime prevention and crime tracking.
Yes, sir.
And we have a very good system going on. So thank you two gentlemen for that, because we need one more topic, and it should only take, I have no idea what, do you want to, you have submitted what is this, on firearms?
Yes, sir.
Is that
Yes,
something
sir.
you can cover?
I
or-
think it's pretty quick. I don't know about citizen comments or questions, but the topic's not too broad.
Yeah,
or the
I think we
focus.
should at least introduce it, and, if we need to schedule more time for it, we absolutely can.
I think we need to do that. So let's go ahead and introduce it. And would you like to introduce it? Or
Yes,
should I?
sir.
Go ahead.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, considering recent Supreme Court of the United States ruling in Brin 2022 and others, as well as state legislation found within Colorado Senate Bill 131 and under the advisement of city attorney, we ask that council consider narrowing city ordinances related to the public carrying of firearms in accordance with those mentioned laws. Currently, city ordinances broadly prohibit open carry within public spaces like our parks and some trails, as noted within 9.44.020 and 9.52.010. The city is asking for the council's direction on how they wish to proceed with this issue, recommending, again, in light of the Supreme Court decision in Colorado SB 131, that the city narrow those prohibitions regarding open carry of firearms in public places, and also consider whether it wishes to opt out, which is an option for council, of the state provisions found within Senate Bill 131 concerning the carrying of firearms in sensitive spaces. Sensitive spaces under those ordinances are defined as city and government buildings and polling places and ballot boxes, things of that nature. Now, the city attorneys were directing us to look or assess those sensitive spaces issues carefully. They're not defined by case precedent or within the law, but there are certainly opportunities to define sensitive spaces, but that's a lawyer question, and I would feel more comfortable with them weighing in on that.
Great.
Given the time, we can reschedule the rest of this discussion for the vision meeting in February 19th, if that's the wish of council.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I'd just like to say that I think that what we have here, this memo to us saying that there's prohibitions on carrying of firearms in public spaces, that's not correct. We do not have, because we have 9.52, which you referenced, 9.52.010, are the exceptions to the prohibition of firearms. And if you have a legal concealed carry permit, you're allowed to carry in parks and open spaces and on the Riverwalk Trail.
There is a prohibition to open carrying.
But open carry?
Yes, sir.
Yes. And
Yeah,
so
the exception is
important
limited to the concealed carry, assuming you've met the state standards and
Correct.
have the proper credentials. Yes, sir.
Yes, I just wanted to make sure that we got that into the record, that the city
And
hasn't prohibited
I
all
think city
carry.
attorney's concern is that it's really broad and vague in the same light, that we need to refine that and define it better.
And we do have Catherine on. I don't know, Catherine, if you want to make any statements before we reschedule this event or this topic.
Yeah, I just want to clarify a few issues, and you all have the memo from us, I believe, and I'm happy to answer any questions at the next session about that. As the chief laid out, Bruin made it very clear as to what's allowed and what's not in relation to prohibiting firearms, and the state of Colorado, in reaction to Bruin, passed a Senate Bill 131, and it lays out very specifically what areas firearms are not allowed in under state law, and that's the opt-out that the chief was referencing. You can opt out of those prohibitions, and they're fairly specific. I don't think that we're really advocating that you investigate other sensitive spaces unless you really want to, because like the chief indicated, that's pretty uncharted territory. So unless you want to litigate over something, I would steer clear of expanding that list of sensitive spaces as designated by the legislature. And those places were recognized in the Bruin decision as sensitive spaces. So that's why the legislature identified those. So I don't want to talk too much because I know we got a hard stop.
Okay, so we'd like to get that decision. Could you just republish it again from the attorneys and then furnish the questions from council, and we'll get them to everybody and we can then conclude. Thank you. Very informative. I really, really appreciate it.
Yes, sir, Mr.
You do a
Mayor.
great job. Thank you.
Thank you.
I see a lot of the planning commission out there chomping at the bit, wanting to take care of everything else.
We
So
just came in under the wire.
you just did. Thank you so much. Okay, we're adjourned.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.